Bonjour. Welcome to today's session looking at parts of the body and saying how it hurts in French. This is aimed at primary schools and I'm going to go through the key vocabulary and phrases and activities that you could do in the classroom. Now, you might be working through this on your own or it might be a training session. So just try to be as interactive as you can and pause the video when you need to repeat and practice the vocabulary. Okay. So let's get started. First of all, if you were looking at the topic of health and well-being or your body, and you might be doing this as a cross-curricular project anyway, or it might be your topic for the term with your learners, what could you teach and how could you bring in some French? So just starting to think of the different curricular areas and how they might all bring something to this topic and what could be done in French. So I like to do this with a big piece of paper and as a mind map, put my topic in the middle, and then think of the different curricular areas and what they might bring. So pause the video and have a go. Here you can see what a group came up with at a training session that we did with probationers actually. So you can see lots of different ideas, different curricular areas, and then French is one of them. So quite a broad topic, the body, bringing in things like food, emotions, and then starting to think about specific activities that you could play, like the Splat game or Simon Says. Okay, so I'm going to take you through some of these things. It's quite a big and meaty topic, and it links to other topics that I've already covered in different presentations. So if we maybe focus first of all on the parts of the face, this is probably what I would start with and introduce these first of all before moving on to other parts of the body. Some of the parts of the body you might already have introduced when you're doing classroom instructions and the children might be used to them. For instance, you might say, regardez, and then you might say les yeux, regardez, look at me, your eyes. Or you might say, levez la main, your hand up. And so the children might know some of those words. Okay, so let's start off first of all with la tête, the head. Okay, that's our head. Le visage, specifically, is the face. And here you can see an image, a Matisse drawing actually, and of introducing the idea of portraits and auto-portraits and self-portraits rather, with famous French artists trying to bring a cultural element in and using this as an image for the vocabulary. You might like to do it with famous French people or, characters or pop stars or anything that the children might maybe remember the words more easily with. I also just like to use my own face and point to my parts of the body when I'm introducing this topic. I think it works really well. So, les yeux. And if you introduced describing the colour of your eyes, children will be used to that. Les yeux. Les cheveux. Your hair. Again, you might have described hair colour already. Le nez. La bouche, and une oreille. If you had both of them, it would be les oreilles. So, a couple of key things there. Why have we got le sometimes and les other times? Anybody know? That's right, le is for singular, you've only got one nose, le nez, but les yeux, you've got two of them. Same with ears, une oreille, one of them, les oreilles, okay, two of them. Now, other words, we've got la and we've got le. So why do we have la and le? Anybody know? So in French, all nouns, these are nouns. All nouns are either masculine or feminine. If they're masculine, we say le or un. And if they're feminine, we say la or une. If you want to go down the grammar route a bit more, you can talk about definite articles, le and la, the, and indefinite articles, a. I like to play a gender game when I'm teaching the sort of concept of grammar of gender. So maybe right and left hand. So you put your right hand up if it's feminine and your left hand up if it's masculine. So you can start off by saying le nez, is that right or left? Le, masculine or feminine? And you might need to put a reminder on the board. So you should all have your left hand up, le nez. If I say la bûche, it's feminine, so it'll be right hand. You can do the same with un and une, and you can also say just the word like bouche and see if they can remember it. Nez, which hand? And if you say a plural word, les yeux, you put both hands up. So let's just try. Une oreille. La bouche. Excellent. Les cheveux. Bravo. Le nez. Super. Les yeux. Les yeux. La bouche. Oreille. Nez. Cheveux. Yeux. Bouche. And if I had a class in front of me, I would then probably say bouche. You put your right hand up. So what's the word for the again? La bouche. Well done. Okay, with older learners, you might turn it into a phrase and you might say, j'ai une bouche. I have a mouth. J'ai une bouche. Younger learners, you might say, voilà la bouche. Voilà. Here is. Okay, voilà la bouche. Or it is. C'est la bouche. C'est la bouche. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est le nez ou la bouche? La bouche. Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est une oreille ou le nez? Le nez. You might say, le nez? Oui ou non? Non. Les cheveux? Oui ou non? Non. So a couple of games there. Yes and no game at the end there, and the choice of two words. With older learners, you might actually not give them a possible answer, and you might just say, qu'est-ce que c'est? Qu'est-ce que c'est? Oui, très bien. Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est le nez. And you might expect a whole phrase rather than just an individual word. So that's how you can differentiate in the class, by different expectations, expecting a whole phrase rather than an individual word, or by input. What are you actually giving them? What clues are you giving them? What support in terms of the questioning approach? Okay. Other key points. We could also then start to say toucher, to touch. Toucher le nez. Toucher la bouche. Toucher les cheveux. You can see if learners can do it before you get there. Toucher les yeux. And with older learners, you can get them to do that together. It's pairs, or a teacher with each group as a kind of caller. One of the pupils is the teacher. And you can obviously turn that into Simon Says. Jacques a dit. Jacques a dit, toucher les yeux. Jacques a dit, toucher le nez. Another nice thing to do is try to think about ways to remember the words to help learners. So create little stories or associations. For instance, le nez, how do we know that's the nose? Le nez. It sounds like nose. It starts with the same letter at least. Nez, nose. Très bien. Les yeux. I like to think about yo-yo eyes because a yo-yo goes up and down. Les yeux, and you can look at it with your eyes, and they're round. Yo-yos are round, and their eyes aren't exactly round, but it's helpful. La bouche, we can block the mouth, blocking something, blocks what goes in and out of the body. La bouche. Une oreille starts with an O, spelt with an O. You can see that circular O, like your ear, une oreille. And les cheveux, cheveux, it's quite a tricky one. The cheveux sounds quite silky and soft to me, like hair might be. But learners can come up with their own little stories and associations to help remember the words. Okay, moving on. Once you've introduced the vocabulary, or if you want to revise it with older learners, you might choose to look at something like this, a poem or a text, and they might have already covered the topics for topic of food or fruit and vegetables. And so you could get them to read, or you could be reading it to them and they could be following, or they could be listening. And if they know the words for the fruits and vegetables, then they might be able to work out what the words are for the different parts of the body. So, c'est un petit bonhomme, petit, petit, petit. Now, don't look at the picture too carefully, because I think that it might not be exactly the same. So, sa tête est une pomme, une pomme. Okay, and you might have food items on the board to help them. So, sa tête est une pomme. Une pomme is an apple. So, if you had a picture of this, then you might draw it out first of all and see if the learners can work it out. Or if the learners know parts of the body but don't know fruit and vegetables, you could do it the other way around. And then you could say the word and they could work out what the fruit and vegetables are. You could also, once learners know all the vocabulary, you could say it and get the pupils to draw it. It's also a nice sorting vocabulary or highlighting activity where the children just are looking for certain types of words. So first of all, they might be looking out for body parts, then they might be looking out for fruit and vegetables. And you can talk about the fact that it's a poem and it follows a similar structure in that the parts of the body are first and the fruit and vegetables come at the end of a phrase. And they can have two different colours. You can then link that in with doing a game like Two Corners, where one wall is fruit and vegetables and one wall is parts of the body, and you say a word and the children have to move to the right category. So you might say une banane and they have to move to the fruit and vegetable wall. Okay. In terms of grammar, you might already have introduced family words and my family, and talking about the word for my, mon père, or mon frère, my brother and my father and my brother, and ma mère, my mother, and ma sœur, my sister. So the word changes, mon for masculine and ma for feminine. And we can see the same here, son for masculine words and sa for feminine. And here the word son, sa means his. Okay, so the man is what we're talking about. It's his parts of the body. Okay, and the parts of the body are the feminine or masculine. So the sa tête, doesn't matter whether it's a man that we're talking about. The tête is the feminine thing. So the sa agrees with the tête, not with the fact that it's a man that we're talking about. It's quite important to make that distinction. Okay. So just different ways of showing how you can use the same topic across a variety of age groups and how you can introduce words either orally or also visually or with texts. Okay, so if we move on to parts of the body, the best way to do this is introduce the words by touching or pointing to parts of your body. So la tête. And there are sound files on the PowerPoint that you can listen. La tête, at the top of your body. Les yeux, your yo-yo eyes. Une œil, if it's just one, is that word, œil. Le nez, the nose. Les oreilles, the ears. And une oreille, just the one, starting with an O sound, like the shape of an ear. La bouche, blocking up the mouth, la bouche. Le pouce, the thumb. And you might have introduced this for heads down, thumbs up. Tête baissée, pouce levé. You might have already heard that word. Les cheveux, your hair. La main, but les mains. Le pied, here we go. And les pieds, foot and feet. La jambe, my leg, la jambe, and les jambes, legs. Okay. So lots of different words there, focusing on the le and the la and the les, drawing children's attention to that, practice saying them in different voices. La tête, les yeux, les oreilles, le nez, les oreilles, une oreille, la bouche. So just playing around with it, getting the kids to be as silly as possible, shouting down the class next door, la bouche, whispering it really quietly. Now, there are loads of great songs that you can use to introduce parts of the body. All children will know head, shoulders, knees and toes. So we can do it in French. Tête, épaules, genoux et pieds. And there's a lovely link here. All these are hyperlinked to a robot doing it and pointing to different parts of his body. The boogie woogie, which is the hokey cokey. So that's a little bit more complicated. And you've got in and out, so some extra words to learn, some prepositions. Then we've got a couple of traditional French comptines or like nursery rhymes. Mon âne, about a donkey. Savez-vous planter des choux, about planting cabbages with different parts of your body. And Jean Petit qui danse, and about a little boy who dances, again with different parts of his body. So for those songs, you can get the children, different groups of children can have different words, or they can point to the parts of the body when they hear it. They can, if they've got flashcards, they can hold a flashcard up. They can see if they can remember the order that the words have come up in. So there's all sorts of things that they could do. Of course, they could just enjoy listening to it. You could use it for background for pass the bag games, like pass the parcel games, where they might have a picture of a body part or a word, and then they have to say it in French. Or the children could try joining in. Could also make up dances, be recorded, performed in an assembly, all sorts. A couple of other songs to teach French as a foreign language. BBC Radio Labo, which is a radio show for Key Stage 2, so for P5 to 7 really. But there's a lovely Super Aliens song in there with a great animation. So if you were working on parts of the body and looking at the concept of monsters or aliens, robots, that sort of thing, that's great. Getting the children maybe to make a junk modelling, recycled type of model, and then describing it. And finally, we've got Alain Lelay with a variety of songs, but always really good fun and good tunes and good animations for children to enjoy. Okay, obviously children could also, before I forget, make up their own song and try to, or rap, clap out a rhythm, make up a dance. So there's lots of different things they could do. So if we break that down now into other activities that children can do, they could do a stick man or a beetle drive. The different ways of doing that. The simplest thing is for instance, for children to draw a stick man. The teacher says a word and the children just tick it off when they hear it. They can use mini whiteboards for that. Another way to do it is to have a dice, okay? And each of the numbers has a different body part associated with it. So, lancer le dé, ça c'est le dé. And then dessiner, to draw la bouche, for instance. Okay, so if number 6 might be, the legs. And you can either make them draw it in order or not. So they have to start with number 1, number 2, etc. And you can write the words up on the board. And they could be, therefore, reading the words. Can also do it with monsters. Similar game, or slightly differently, where the teacher could be describing a monster and the children with their whiteboards, and pens could be drawing it. So you might say, c'est un monstre avec 2 jambes et 3 têtes. So you could be revising numbers and parts of the body. And that revises the phrase c'est as well, which you already came across with c'est le nez, okay? You could also introduce the phrase il a and elle a, he or she or it has. Il a 2 bras. He has or it has 2 arms. You can take that step further and add in colours as well. So, il a une jambe rouge, a red leg. So then we can have numbers, colours and body parts, okay? Il a 5 têtes bleues, for instance. Children can obviously draw their own, make them out of plasticine, write a little description, create an animation, using something like Chatterpix, for instance. So there's lots of different activities that they can do with that. Should already have looked at description of hair and eyes in a previous presentation, so I'm not going to go through that in more detail, but that's linked. Children could draw their own self-portrait, for instance, and then they could present themselves to the class. And you could do that in the style of a famous French artist we saw earlier, Matisse. It could be using Van Gogh style, Impressionism, looking at Seurat pointillism, looking, there's all sorts, looking more at like Picasso style work, and they could produce that and then present it. Another great thing to do is to look at stories to revise the language. So in the power language, there is Albin le Petit Elephant, which looks at a little elephant who wants to have a big nose like his mummy and his daddy, and it goes on a journey and meets lots of different animals to try to get a big nose. So you and your class could enjoy that, act it out. People could have different parts. But you could also make up your own story and change it. So it's not about an elephant. It could be about, a lion, wanting to have a big head, for instance. Okay. So you could adapt it and the children could create their own. Older children might want to create little mini books. You might want to create a class big book. It could be performed. You could have images, do it as a comic strip, have text, have dialogue. I mean, there's all sorts of ways of extending it. I like to use the book Eric Carle, particularly with younger learners, From Head to Toe. It's got images of different animals, and, with my hand, I can wave. So it brings in verbs of movement as well, and different animals, and the children can join in and do it, first of all in English, and then you could try to revise the parts of the body. What's he using to wave? Oh, his hand, for instance. Oh, la main. Très bien. BBC Radio Labo also has a story, which would be good for second level. Just put some other resources in here. There's a lovely song for masculine and feminine, which you might like to use, which is quite upbeat, from BBC Virtually There, which is aimed at second level, but it could be, used at sort of P4 as well. That's sort of in between going from first to second. I've already talked about Radio Labo. Lightbulb Languages has tons of resources to do with parts of the body, making monsters, listening activity, where there's a worksheet that you colour, looking at numbers and stuff. And for the Highland Council, we also have on the SharePoint site a whole stack of resources in the first level section under body. So if we move on a little bit from parts of the body, we might look at saying how you're feeling and how something hurts, looking at the idea of j'ai mal, And I would introduce this by pointing to parts of your body. J'ai mal à la tête, j'ai mal au nez, j'ai mal à la bouche, j'ai mal aux yeux, and get them to repeat it. Okay. There's lots of games we can play with this. Bonjour, monsieur le facteur. So it's a bit like le facteur n'est pas passé. But in this one, what we do is we have a group mime. So each group is given an envelope with something that they have to mime, and they have to mime it, and the other children have to guess what it is. Supermarket game, like for instance going to the doctor and having a long list of problems. So the first person starts off, j'ai mal à la tête, and the next person says, j'ai mal à la tête et au nez, and you continue. Works well in small groups, and some children might need visual support for that. They might need little picture cards to help them. The consequences game, so a group might have a piece of paper and they write something that's wrong with them. They fold over the piece of paper, pass it to the next person writes something, fold it over and keep passing it round. So everybody's writing at the same time on their piece of paper and passing it. And then at the end they have to try to read it, and older learners might be able to try to correct the grammar. Might need to provide some support on the board with the key phrases to help them. Pairs, children might want to make up their own pairs with parts of the body or with these phrases for saying how something hurts. And you can do that as a bingo game or as a line bingo. So bingo using a whiteboard where the children would maybe have 6, so make a grid of 6 or a grid of 9. They have to try and cross everything off. They could write in English or draw a picture. Line bingo, they have a piece of paper which they fold into segments, to squares. They have to write or draw a picture on each, and the teacher says things and they can only tear off the ones that are at the end. So they're listening out for 2 things, but they have more of a chance of getting different things because they write what they want as well. Writing by numbers or by dice. We've already talked about the game. We're using a dice and the children can actually write those sentences out. Pictionary I've gone over. Beat the clock, so in a set amount of time they have to write 5 words, for instance, and see if they can do it. And last but not least, having a doctor role play. So getting the children to create a little role play with sound effects and costumes and accessories for going to the doctors and saying that something hurts. Bonjour, bonjour, ça va? Non, ça va mal. Oh, pourquoi? J'ai mal à la tête. Oh la la. You know, that sort of thing. Okay. An activity that I like to do with parts of the body is to have sorting cups. So say 3 cups, masculine, feminine and plural. Or you can do it with post-it notes. And the children have phrases and they have to try and work out which phrase they would put the cup into. Now, if they don't physically have the phrases in front of them, they could just hold the cup up or hold the post-it up. And that way you don't have to give them each the phrase. You could just write them on the board. So this is working on the grammar. J'ai mal aux dents. AUX is for the plural. Dent ends in an S, so that's how we know that's plural. So that one would go in the plural cup. J'ai mal à la tête. La is feminine. À la tête is for feminine words, so that would go in the feminine. J'ai mal au ventre. Au is what we would use for the masculine, so it would go into the le or the masculine pot. Okay, so it's a good way of practicing it. A fun activity, if you've got a softball, perhaps a gym hall, is to throw a ball aiming at a pupil's part of their body, and then when they have the ball hit them, they have to say what part of their body is sore, and then they throw it at another pupil. There's various other games that you can play, as PE games, for instance, like 4 corners with parts of the body. So, just trying to bring things into your daily routines and across the curriculum is, the key, really. Lastly, just wanted to finish on roll a dice game that I had mentioned previously. So for number 1, it's your head. So I've written it in English. So you could write this out in French. So if you roll a 1, you would write out head in French, or I have a head, or it is a head, or here is a head. So you might say j'ai une tête, I have, c'est une tête, it is, or voilà une tête, here is a head. I might say 5, legs. Can you remember how to say that? See if you can write a phrase or a word. 2, nose. 4, ears. 3, mouth. Et 6, back. We haven't actually done back, which is le dos. So answers would be something like numéro 1, la tête, numéro 2, le nez, numéro 3, la bouche, numéro 4, les oreilles, numéro 5, les jambes, numéro 6, le dos. Alors, merci. And the main thing really is to practice. So with your class, have a go at one of these activities. And as I said before, try and bring in daily routine, maybe name the groups, different parts of the body. Do a brain break, get them to toucher, le nez, la tête, different parts of the body. When you're doing the register, give a different part of the body. All sorts of things that you could do just to help reinforce it on a daily basis.